Good morning. And what I have here is a 1995 Harley Davidson Electra Glide Ultra Classic. It is the first year for fuel injection for Harley Davidson. It has the Magneti Morelli fuel injection. And what I need to do is replace the fuel pump. It's making a little bit of noise, so we're getting ready to go on a trip in a bit. And I want to make sure we're not going to have any fuel pump problems. So what we need to do now is to be able to drain the fuel tank and replace that fuel pump. So I'm going to try to take you through that process. What we need to do here is, you can see we have the crossover. This is your crossover hose that goes from one side of the tank to the other. So we're going to start on the other side, I believe, and we're going to take the hose off that side of the tank, drain it into a gas can, and then we'll do the same on this side. And then at the end of the day, we're going to replace that hose as well, because it's very likely that that is original. So we're not going to take any chances there. Why put a new fuel pump on and put old fuel lines back in? So let me get set up and I'll bring you back. Alright, so what I have here is some 3/8 fuel line. And what we're going to do is we're going to slip this off of here. And then I'm going to put the other end into the fuel gas tank. And we're going to drain the fuel out of the bike. And then once we get this side drained out, we're going to go ahead and drain out the other side. So this can be a little bit tricky. So this one just has a squeeze clamp on. So we're going to take that, and you might notice that I also have these pliers here. They're used for radiator hose, fuel hose, those types of things, that we can pinch off any of the other fuel supply coming to the other side, or coming from the other side. And we can address that so we can kind of minimize any kind of fuel leakage. Now, I do have some paper towels here to kind of suck up any of the remaining fuel that's going to pop out of there. So we're going to get this to the point where it's almost to the edge. And we're just about there. So we're going to slip that off and slip that on. You always have to be extremely careful working around gas, working around any type of fuel, because it's not only the liquid, I'm sure you all know this, but it's not only the liquid that is flammable, it's also the vapors. So make sure that you're very, very careful anytime you're working around any kind of fuel. Allen head bolt, we have one here. And right down here we have one. Just a little word of note here. 1995 Electra Glide Ultra Classic has a little badge here. This bike is 592 of 2000, so it is a numbered bike. I'm very happy to have it. It's been a good bike for me. I've had it about 3 years. So we're going to start taking these bolts off. A lot of times it doesn't take a whole lot of torque to get these loosened up. And you want to be careful not to drop anything down in the fuel tank. At this point, we're going to take these screws and set them aside. 2 long ones up front, short one in the bottom. And this should just lift off a little bit. Now, I don't know if you probably didn't notice, but what I have done is I have disconnected the battery. I've laid a towel across the battery terminals, so there's no way that those terminals can make a connection. I'm just going to lay that right there. There's not a whole lot that we need to do here. We'll take our vent tube off, and we're going to try to make sure that this is going to be out of our way for now. It is a plastic tube, so be careful of that. Be mindful. As you can see here, we have some connectors for this. Will be for the sending unit. Try to zoom in there for you. Those are for the sending unit for your fuel gauge. So this one actually says 3 amp. This one says 10 amp, and then this is a ground. So 10 on the left, 3 on the right. Again, we're going to just lay these aside. Just be careful not to damage the wire. Proper torque size looks to be T20. Don't go yanking on this crazy. All right, you know what, before I go any further, I need to cover the painted surface of my tank. Alright, so you can see that I did get a little bit of painter's tape and some paper towels just to protect the surface there a bit. So let's see what we got here. Now be careful when you have this sending unit. I think we're going to need to disconnect that sending unit. Or will we? There's the fuel pump over there. Yeah, we're going to have to disconnect the sending unit. And you don't want to bend this arm because this is what reads your fuel level. So as you can see, when your tank is fully assembled, as your fuel level goes up, this then, I'm going to turn it around for you. As your fuel level goes up, this then goes up, and this gauge here, inside of here, has a little potentiometer. It changes the resistance. I don't know if you can see that in there. Changes the resistance as this float goes up. So we're going to set this aside. Taking extra care not to bend that arm. So gasket's in pretty good condition, but I have a new one, so we're going to replace it. Alright, so I got you on the handheld here, and we're going to try to look down in there, and you can see that fuel pump down in there, so we got to figure out how we're going to get to that. Take a closer look at it. While we're here, we're also going to replace this fuel filter that is right here. Difficult to see, a little difficult to work with, but we'll get that. Alright, so this is a half-inch bolt down in there to get your fuel filter out. Sure it's not on there very tight, and it is not. No reason to make it tight, so we're going to loosen that up. Going to go the rest of the way with our fingers. It does have a washer and a lock washer on there. And I think what we're going to need to do is take this out as a assembly. You can kind of see what we got here. You can see there's a filter in, filter out. Does look like these hoses have been replaced, maybe 2011 or so. And so we'll take a look at that to see what we got going on in here. We got one clamp definitely needs to come off. The other two are going, these wires here are going to the fuel pump. I think after we get the one clamp off of there, we can go ahead and take everything apart. That's going to loosen up our fuel filter. Let's see if we can keep as much as we can in there. Reach in here and try to slip our pump up. Okay. You can see, here's our assembly. It goes from one side of the fuel tank to the other. It sits in here like that. Alright, so I got the old pump out. You can see, hopefully you can see all that debris that's inside the pickup strainer. It's quite a good amount there. You can see our new fuel pump. New fuel pump is from the fuel pump factory. You can see there, again, 95 Electra. Connections appear to be very similar, if not exactly the same. So also I wanted to show you all of this mess in there at the pickup that actually went past the screen. Alright, I have my drag specialty fuel filter. If you can make out that part number. So it's looking down into the tank. You can see that use some high quality, high pressure fuel injection hose clamps. Hopefully you can see the fuel filter that's in there properly connected. You can also see those clamps on there, and you should be able to see in there with the fuel filter, or the fuel pump rather. You can see the lines. You see that little gray pole in there and that beige case. It basically clams around the fuel pump, and then that case just sits down in there and sits on two posts in there. You'll see what I mean when you pull it apart. Alright, we got our new gasket on our sending unit here. We'll line that up, but don't forget to connect your wires. So that's how that sending unit sits down in your tank, like that. And you want to make sure that these wires, I think they were coming up here like this. This will be the power and grounds for your pump and sending unit. Easy, if you're nice and easy and careful, you can get this done. Again, just take your time. And we're going to try to line up our holes, our new gasket. I would suggest starting all of your bolts, all of your little screws here first, into their holes to make sure that everything's lining up. So one, you don't cross thread. Two, you don't mess up any of your gasket. Again, just take your time, everything should fall right back into place. You should be able to see all your holes in the gasket, all your holes in your fuel tank. And before I forget, I'm going to take a rag here, and we're going to close up the opening to the fuel tank, because now we don't have to take it back apart. We certainly don't want to have to do that if we don't need to. Nice and easy. It's a little hard to turn these with this flange sticking out here, but again, just take your time. It should all fall into place nice and easy. You shouldn't have to cross thread any bolts if you're taking your time. Getting them in there nice and finger tight, get them a finger start. A few threads on there. No reason to force anything. Everything should go right back the way it came out. Nice fresh gasket. You don't want to crush the gasket too far. We're just making sure these are all going in there nice and easy. We got 2 more to go. And I can see the holes lining up nice. Some of these bolts have a little Teflon washer on those. Sometimes you got to wind those up the screw by hand. And we'll get those started. Checking to make sure my gasket's even all the way around, so we're not crushing anything. Everything looks good. So the way I've always been taught is to tighten things like this down in a kind of a crisscross pattern. Don't force anything, kind of in a star. Come back across here, work from your center out, crisscross. Down here, kind of like tightening up a wheel lug. Again, it doesn't take a lot of torque, so we're going to start from the top. Just make sure these are snugged up. If you're a stickler for torque specs, check your service manual. I don't have one readily available, so I'm using the classic backyard mechanic method. Snugged them up. First step, crisscross, working from the center out. And go back and snug them up. So I don't see any spots around. I think we did okay. Again, you can see I'm not putting a whole lot of torque on these. Nice torque washer, gasket rather. You don't want to crack or split that due to over tightening. Okay, so we'll come back here with our dashboard. And our dashboard, not quite ready to put that on just yet. remember, we got to put these on, and then we have our vent tube. We can go ahead and slick that on. And I believe the 10 amp was on. Should be good to go there. Alright, so we're going to get this dash back on here. Just make sure when you're putting it all back together, getting it nice and even. Give a little extra care around the fuel neck. You got a little gasket that goes around here. It tends to want to pop off. Just like that. There we go. Put in our bolts. Well, so you now can see that the job's been completed. Everything's been put back and reinstalled, and we're back on the road again.